The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the David Pakman Show. I'm Farron Cousins from Ring of Fire, sitting in for David Pakman today. Obviously, a lot to talk about. Yesterday was a pretty big news day, and the biggest news we got out of yesterday is the fact that Paul Manafort is going to spend a little bit more time in prison than he had originally thought. Paul Manafort returned in front of a judge yesterday to get the rest of his sentence. This one, pretty decent, not great. You know, obviously, if he were a different person, perhaps somebody not well politically connected, perhaps somebody with no money, he would be spending a few decades in prison. Instead, he got an additional 43 months added to his sentence. Pretty weak, but there is a silver lining to all of this, because less than 1 hour after the judge yesterday added an additional 43 months onto Manafort's sentence for the additional crimes that he had committed, New York prosecutors announced, hey, wait, we also have some charges we would like to file against Mr. Manafort. These charges include mortgage fraud, falsifying business records to illegally obtain millions of dollars as part of a years-long mortgage fraud scheme for which he could face 8 to 25 years in prison. What's significant about these charges, other than the fact that, hey, he may go to prison for even longer, is the fact that these are state charges. And this is why those are so important. Because Manafort might be able to get a presidential pardon for the previous sentences that he's received and convictions, but he can't be pardoned for these. These are state crimes, not federal crimes, so there is no pardon to be dangled from the Trump administration. Mr. Manafort is likely going to be spending a very, very long time in prison. The other thing about this, though, is that obviously Manafort right now, he's going to get credit for, I think, 9 months of time served. He's going to start serving his sentence. And then a few weeks down the road, because this investigation is ongoing, he is going to have to go to New York, be arraigned, and then face the charges there. Likely to be another lengthy trial, followed by a sentencing hearing. The chances of Manafort making it out of prison, really at this point for the rest of his life, getting slimmer by the day. And these charges filed in New York less than an hour after this other sentence was handed down. This was no coincidence. They were waiting. They wanted to see what was going to happen with this other sentencing. And they didn't want to interrupt it. They didn't want to supersede it. They didn't want that judge to change their sentence ruling based on these new accusations. No. They let the process play out, and then as soon as it had finished, they said, by the way, don't forget to send him our way because we may need to add a few more years onto that sentence as well. A lot of people wondering, what does this mean for Donald Trump? Well, the unfortunate answer is nothing. These charges really have nothing to do with Donald Trump. Just Paul Manafort being a criminal for many, 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 many years, and it finally caught up to him. He wasn't able to conceal the lies, to conceal the fraud, to conceal the conspiracies anymore. So does this affect Donald Trump? Not necessarily. So, you know, whatever that means, Manafort's going away. This doesn't affect Trump. In fact, lawyers in court actually tried to bring up the collusion issue, to which the judge yesterday said, no, stop it, irrelevant. Doesn't matter for what we're doing here. Now, Trump actually took those statements to mean that the judge said that, hey, I didn't commit any collusion at all. This whole thing's a witch hunt, and this judge just proved it. Not at all what happened. Not even close. The judge just said, we're not here to talk about collusion. I'm talking about all of these financial crimes, and that's what we're going to focus on because I'm not the judge for the collusion issue. Trump didn't take it that way. But nonetheless, Donald Trump is still freaking out right now on Twitter. He's angry. He's lashing out at the investigations. He's lashing out at everyone, really. And part of the reason is because of the Manafort sentencing, but the other part of it is because of the news that just recently broke about his good buddy, former buddy, I guess, Michael Cohen. Because according to emails that have now been uncovered, Michael Cohen's attorney had been talking with Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump's attorney, and it seems likely, based on the emails, that they were dangling a pardon in front of Michael Cohen. The emails suggest that Cohen's attorney said, "You can sleep well tonight." This was following the FBI raid on Michael Cohen's office. "You can sleep well tonight because you've got friends in high places." Cohen's attorney later clarified that, does this mean a pardon was dangled? Does it mean we talked about it? Maybe for about 15 seconds. That's about the length of time he says a pardon may have been dangled in front of Cohen. But that 15 seconds is significant because that 15 seconds, if a pardon was ever dangled and ever pitched to Michael Cohen as, hey, play nice, you got friends in high places, there could be a pardon waiting for you on the table, so don't screw this up. That's obstruction of justice on behalf of the Trump team. That could be obstruction of justice on behalf of Donald Trump himself. Now, these reports also indicate that the Trump administration was worried about Michael Cohen flipping on Donald Trump. They wanted him to stay in line. They wanted him to do nothing bad or say nothing bad that might end up getting Donald Trump in a little bit more trouble. Now, of course, all of this happened prior to Michael Cohen's recent testimony in front of Congress, and that also ties into this story because according to Cohen's lawyer, he did talk to the lawyer who then talked to Giuliani about a potential pardon. Yet, just a couple weeks ago, Michael Cohen told us that he never talked to anyone about a potential pardon. If we're to believe his lawyer, which we probably should, then that would mean that Michael Cohen did once again lie in front of Congress a couple weeks ago. That is significant because if he lied about this, what else did he lie about? Kind of throws a big monkey wrench into the gears of everything that was revealed during Michael Cohen's testimony. Do we take it at face value now? Do we assume he was telling the truth? We know he lied about this now. Were there other lies there? That's a big question. Not so good for the information he revealed, but silver lining, I guess, on this is that he did provide us with the receipts, quite literally, backing up most of what he said. But these other receipts, these emails that have come out, show that he did lie, at least it appears he lied, about the pardon issue. Not good for Cohen, but certainly not good for Trump. Because again, if they were dangling a pardon in front of him, if they were trying to get him to play ball, play nice with the team, not do anything that's going to get Trump in trouble, that's obstruction of justice. That's witness tampering. That's trying to alter the potential testimony of a witness. Yes, that is bad. Yes, that could be considered an impeachable offense. And yes, this could land Donald Trump in a hell of a lot of hot water. But not hot water with Nancy Pelosi, right? I mean, she told us earlier this week in a Washington Post interview that she's not too worried about impeachment. Trump's not worth it. Here's her exact quote here. "Impeachment is so divisive to the country that unless there's something so compelling and overwhelming and bipartisan, I don't think we should go down that path because it divides the country. And he's just not worth it." There's two possible scenarios here with Nancy Pelosi's statement. First of all, she could be playing that three-dimensional chess we hear so much about and maybe wants to throw Trump off the scent and say, no impeachment, silly nonsense, right? We're not going to go that path. Don't worry about that, Trump. Essentially lulling him into this false sense of security so that he doesn't do something rash like fire Robert Mueller Or, start questioning people in the DOJ, pulling them in front of the Oval Office desk and saying, tell me what you know. Yeah, maybe she's just trying to say, no, don't worry, we're not going to impeach you. Just go watch Fox News, everything's cool. Or she could be being honest and like, I'm not going to impeach the guy, it's not worth it. Why bother? Why pay attention to the majority of people in this country who say maybe this is the route we need to go? Why bother with all the crimes that are already on the table? Because nobody cares about those, certainly not the Republicans in the Senate, so it's not even like we could vote to remove him from office. So what's the point? The point is law and order. The point is checks and balances. I know there's no part of me that doesn't understand this. We're not going to remove Trump from office, right? There is nothing, I believe, that could come out even from the Mueller report that would convince enough Republicans in the Senate to vote to kick him out of office. Even if the Mueller report contains photographs of Donald Trump sitting down with Vladimir Putin while holding a sign that says, I'm colluding with him to steal the 2016 election, you're still not going to get enough Republicans. They love him because he's doing everything they've wanted a Republican president to do for a long time. Yeah, they may not always agree with his delivery or the way he acts, but policy-wise, he is right on board with them. So it's never going to happen. So does that mean we never try? No, it does not. The people in this country want some answers about a lot of the things that have happened. They want to know that Congress still has enough courage to stand up to the executive branch. We have 3 branches of government, and they're all supposed to be equal, and they're all checks and balances on one another. But right now, they're not acting like it. And yes, I understand there are much more important issues facing this country and facing Congress than impeaching a guy knowing that you're not going to remove him from office. I get that. It doesn't mean this can't be a side project. It doesn't mean that you can't have committees already working on the articles based on what's already on the table. You don't have to wait for the Mueller report. We have evidence of obstruction of justice. That's clear as day. We have the campaign finance violation with the Stormy Daniels hush money payment. Clear as day. Those crimes are ready. They're waiting. We could do this right now. But you have to do it. And you have to do it because you have to show the American public that the executive branch of the federal government is not above the law, no matter who is sitting in that Oval Office. And, by the way, you get the added benefit of running a 2020 presidential campaign against a guy who was impeached. And you also have a bunch of Republican senators up for re-election in 2020 that suddenly have to go explain to their constituents why they should vote for them even after they voted to keep a criminal in the White House. Sounds like a win-win to me. I'm Farron Cousins sitting in for David Pakman. We'll be right back with more of The David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to The David Pakman Show. I am Farron Cousins from Ring of Fire, sitting in for David Pakman today. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/TheRingOfFire or follow me on Twitter at FarronBalanced. You know, one of the things I love about some of these Trump supporters out there is that they are just so rabid in their defense of the president that they don't care if they make sense. In fact, some of them don't even care if their defense of the president and their desperation to take down Democrats ends up causing them to break the law. And in case you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, I am of course referring to Jacob Wohl, everybody's favorite pro-Donald Trump Twitter troll. Or at least he was until he got booted off of Twitter for creating a bunch of fake accounts. And it's actually those fake accounts that cost him his Twitter feed that also could land him in legal jeopardy. Here's what's happened. Jacob Wohl recently took a trip to Minnesota along with right-wing provocateurs Ali Alexander and Laura Loomer. Their goal was to make this documentary film where they were going to expose how Representative Ilhan Omar married her own brother so that he could become a U.S. citizen. That was the goal of this documentary. And along the way, Jacob Wohl, as part of the film that is now released, goes to the police office. Not because of what Representative Omar allegedly did, but because he received a death threat on Twitter. And I've seen the screenshots of it. It's a pretty disgusting message that he has received from a man by the name of Drake Holmes. The only problem is when he reported this death threat to the police, which he did in the documentary, and they showed the screenshot of these messages and that dude's face is right there, he didn't know that in between the time of filming this and airing it to the public, that he would get busted for all of the fake accounts he created. So how did Jacob Wohl's fake Twitter accounts tie into Drake Holmes? Well, the simple fact that Drake Holmes was a pseudonym, or shouldn't even say pseudonym, it was a fake account created by Jacob Wohl. Jacob Wohl, by all available evidence, created a fake account on Twitter just to send himself a death threat so that he could make it look like liberals were after him. His life was in danger. He didn't know what he was going to do, so he files a police report, says, please look into this. Find this Drake Holmes guy who somehow accidentally misspelled his own name and his Twitter handle, by the way. Jacob Wohl is a serial liar, okay? We know that. The story came out last week or a week before, whenever it was, that the woman he alleged had been sexually assaulted by Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor, came out and said, yeah, it never happened. They told me to do this. They actually tricked me into doing this, and that's why I ran away. I had to physically get away from him, which is what happened in the airport right before, if you all remember his little press conference that he did, it fell apart. His allegations against Robert Mueller fell apart, just like his claims of being threatened have fallen apart. The only difference is what he's done in this case, assuming he did do it, it's 100% illegal. It's exactly what Jussie Smollett allegedly did and has now been arrested for and appeared in court again today to have to answer for. The same thing has to happen to Jacob Wohl at this point. And to be honest, I think an investigation needs to be launched to find out what Ali Alexander and Laura Loomer knew as well, because they were in cahoots with Jacob Wohl. And I find it highly unlikely that these two provocateurs did not know that their little compatriot sitting next to them in their little trip to Minnesota hadn't created fake accounts, hadn't sent himself death threats, and then helped him film it and report it to the police. No, this is bigger than just one Twitter idiot. I think those other two were involved, and I think in order to find out whether or not they were, we need to have a proper investigation of this. And Ali Alexander claims, oh, I'm going to investigate this. Oh, I hope I wasn't taken for a fool. I've been up against Ali in a debate. And let me tell you, it's not that hard to debunk everything the guy says. I did it live on the air. Actually had to pull up info on my phone because he refused to believe that I was right, and I had to show it to him. I said, no, you are wrong and you're lying. Be honest for once. I don't think he's being honest about this. I don't think Jacob Wohl is being honest. And what Jacob Wohl has done here with filing this fake police report is 100% criminal. Let's also not overlook the fact that the guy is being investigated by federal authorities for his fake accusation against Robert Mueller. Jacob Wohl needs help. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that if you go through what he was saying on Twitter, like his weird, crazy, obsessive responses to Donald Trump, I truly believe that this kid needs some help. There's something wrong. You know, I don't know what it is. I don't know what the answer is, but this kid needs to be in therapy because he needs to get to the root of what is happening to him and find the answers. He is so desperate to defend the president and try to take down the left, that he's willing to break the law to do it. A normal person doesn't think in that manner, but Jacob Wohl does. Hopefully, Jacob Wohl does get taken into custody, because I believe he needs to be in custody. Not just for these crimes he may have committed, but because this kid is seriously a little bit not right, and he needs some therapy so they can help him and make him better. There's still hope, there's still a chance. But he's got to get to the root of his problems instead of trying to take down everyone, even if it's illegal, in order to defend the president. In other news, another legal, weird, horrible Republican news, Christopher Hasson, the Coast Guard lieutenant who had a kill list of journalists, Democratic members of Congress, and other prominent Democrats in this country, is not going to be charged with terrorism. Earlier this week, prosecutors came out. They had used the word terrorism repeatedly, but when in court, he is not being charged with terrorism. In fact, the charges against him are really, really pathetic when you think about it. Drugs and weapons charges is what they're getting him on. Drugs and weapons charges. The man had an obsession with neo-Nazis. We know that from his search histories. He was actively plotting to assassinate political leaders. We know that through his search histories, looking up where they hang out, what kind of security details they have, where they live. He had the weapons to carry this out. He wanted to murder people. And you're bringing him up on drugs and weapon charges. He was radicalized by right-wing propaganda. If he were, I don't know, say a Muslim, we would call this terrorism. If we found out that somebody in literally any other country in the world was going to do this, we would call it terrorism. But when white males, right-wing white males in the United States do this, we don't call it terrorism. We don't charge them with terrorism. But make no mistake about it, what this man did, what he wanted to do, what he was planning on doing is 100% the definition of terrorism. He wanted to go down in history. He wanted to become a martyr for the cause. He wanted to kill as many people in as little time as possible so that everyone throughout history would remember his name as one of the worst murderers in the United States. And he wanted to take out the political enemies of Donald Trump. Right-wing extremism is a major threat to our national security. And those are not my words. Those are the words of the FBI and the CIA. They have repeatedly been telling us that for years. The problem is not getting better, it is getting worse. As this country does become more polarized, more divided, more things like this keep cropping up. You know, the guy sending the bombs to people from CNN, his van covered in all those Republican stickers. We have to do better as a country. We're seeing these people who are mentally unstable get their hands on weaponry that they should not be able to get their hands on. You know, the red flags, the warning signs were all there in these cases, yet we failed as a country to stop them from, at least in some part, getting to the planning stages of their attack. Luckily, this Coast Guard lieutenant was caught before he was ever able to do some of this stuff. But it shouldn't have even been able to get that far. He should not have had the means to even be able to plan this or the weapons to attempt to carry it out. That's where the failures in the system occurred. And those are the failures that we have to correct. But when we talk about mental instability here in the United States, we cannot overlook the President of the United States. George Conway, the husband of White House counselor Kellyanne Conway, repeatedly warned us on Wednesday in a very long Twitter screed that we have got to do something about the President of the United States. And he wasn't saying it to be funny. He wasn't saying it to be mocking. And I don't say these things that way either. He's saying them because clearly Donald Trump has some kind of pathology that needs to be thoroughly vetted and looked into. That's what George Conway was warning us about. And here's why he went into this. He said, when you look at the Tim Apple lie, you know, Trump first comes out and says, no, I said Tim Cook Apple. I just said Cook really fast and you couldn't hear it. And then it was, no, I was saying Tim Apple. I just said it really fast to save time. The lie kept changing, but why did the lie exist in the first place? You know, it would have been a quick 2-second funny goof that people would have moved on from half an hour later, but he kept it alive because he couldn't keep his story straight because of the massive amount of narcissism that he has for himself, that he had to try to fix it. But he doesn't know how to not lie, and that's why the lie kept changing. Nothing about it makes sense, and that's what George Conway was telling us in his, Twitter diatribe. It doesn't make sense. A normal person wouldn't do this, but a normal person also doesn't have access to nuclear codes, or control the entire military, or control an entire branch of government, and Trump does. And we have to take this seriously, because it's not just that one lie. It's not just the one lie before that. It's all of them taken together. We have to do something. We have a 25th Amendment for a reason. We just need a Senate with enough courage to invoke it. I'm Farron Cousins in for David Pakman. We'll be right back.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. I am Farron Cousins from Ring of Fire, sitting in for David Pakman today. You know, earlier this week, one of my favorite reports of the entire year came out. And I know it sounds a little weird to have a favorite report, but this is it. And I've covered this report every single year since they started putting it out. It is the Media Matters annual report of how horrible the corporate media did with their coverage of climate change in 2018. In spite of the fact, as Joe Rahm at Think Progress points out, in spite of the fact that we received more bad news about the future of the planet really than ever before in 2018, network coverage of the issue of climate change was actually down last year. It was down 45% from the year before. And it's not like it was just, oh, we got a couple bad reports showing us we've got 12 years left to take action before we kind of hit the point of acceleration on the issue. No, it's the fact that we had 250 people here in the United States die from storms and other disasters, fires, that made climate change, were made so much worse by climate change. 250 people, a little more than 250, from just actually 3 events. 2 major hurricanes and a major wildfire in California that raged on for most of the year in different parts. All of these incidents were made worse by climate change. The 3 of those alone accounted for more than $100 billion worth of damage, and yet in spite of that, the major networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, devoted 45% less of their coverage from the year before to climate change last year. To make matters even worse, the only reason that number wasn't higher than 45% is because NBC, on Meet the Press at the end of the year, December 30th, really at the end of the year, they decided to run just their full episode that week, 45 minutes on nothing but climate change. Good for them, by the way, but maybe try doing that a few more times each year, considering this is an issue that affects literally every single person on the planet. You'd think maybe it would warrant a little bit more coverage. Here's the thing. None of the network's news reports on the major hurricanes of 2018 even mentioned climate change. The major storms Not one mention of climate change. We have coverage was down for everybody, as I mentioned, except for NBC because they had that 46-minute episode on climate change. But what was equally worrisome was the lack of solutions offered in these segments. You know, Fox didn't offer solutions in any of the 5 segments they devoted to climate change, but only 15, roughly 20% of the coverage from the other networks offered any kind of solution. And here's why that's a problem. And we have seen climate scientists, you know, Catherine Hayhoe, Michael Mann, they've been more outspoken about this recently because we cannot just try to scare people into wanting to do something about climate change. That doesn't work. You can't just say, we're all going to die in 12 years unless you do something right now. No. It almost has to be an inspiring message of hope that there are solutions, that this is a fixable problem. And that's what drives me insane about it, is that it is a fixable problem. And yes, we do have the technology available to address it, to get us off of fossil fuels. We just aren't implementing it. And I know everybody's going to say, well, that requires major restructuring of our power grids and our energy infrastructure. And yeah, it does. And we do have the technology to do that. But we had that technology for years and we didn't do it. So yeah, I understand that our grid can't handle it right now, but if we would have done it 5 years ago, hell, 10 years ago, the grid could handle it. We screwed up. We, as a country, as a species, yeah, we screwed up. That doesn't mean the technology doesn't exist. It just means we didn't implement it, and now we're behind the 8 ball, but there is still time. And that's what's missing from most of these reports. Because you can't just go out there anymore and say, look, bad things are happening, bad things are happening. No, you have to say bad things are happening, but we can change it. We have the ingenuity, we have the technology, we have the manpower, and as a country here, we certainly have the money. I mean, look at Donald Trump's budget, boosting up the military budget by tens of billions of dollars. What if we only took the increase in military budget, not even touching the other $720 billion, but just the extra 30 or 40 billion, and put that all towards remaking our energy grid, towards a jobs program to get people out of fossil fuel production and into solar panels, windmills, you know, geothermal, hydropower, all kinds of different programs. We could retrain these workers to work in those fields, and I guarantee you, you'd probably have a lot less people dying of black lung. But hey, let's just ignore all the solutions, right? Let's just keep doing business as usual, because some of us aren't going to be around when the really horrible effects of climate change come to call. So what does it matter, right? It matters greatly. And it doesn't matter if you know, I don't have kids, I don't have to worry about the future. You do have to worry about the future. You have to. Because if you don't, you know, that's almost a sociopathic way to go through life. You cannot do that. But the media is a big part of the problem. The media continues to fail us. And why do they do that? Well, essentially because they're paid to fail us. You've got these major oil companies that no matter how progressive a news organization is on corporate media, they're going to take fossil fuel money. You're going to see Exxon ads. You're going to see BP ads. You're going to see all kinds of ads from companies who are profiting off the destruction of the planet. And until they get those ads off the air, they're going to continue to ignore the problem and not say that, hey, solutions exist. But before we get to those solutions, here's a word from Exxon. Yeah, not going to cut it if you do it that way. And here's another thing too, though. You know, we always talk about climate change. We talk about the issues. We're destroying the planet. We know that. We're making the weather worse. We've got this god-awful bomb cyclone happening right now, which has essentially formed what could be called a cold weather hurricane over dry land in the middle of America, 100-mile-an-hour winds. But climate change is only a small part. I can't say small part. It's at least half the picture, don't get me wrong. But it's half the picture. There's another half of the picture about pollution that we're not talking about enough either. And that is the fact that just pollution alone, not even factoring in the extreme weather from climate change, but the pollution alone is killing people. In fact, for the most recent years that numbers are available, which I believe is 2015, 8.8 million people around the globe died just from air pollution. Air pollution alone killed 8.8 million human beings in a single year. Air pollution now kills more people a year than smoking. So that horrible thing that we've known for decades kills people, smoking gives you cancer, tobacco industry covered it up, that doesn't even hold a candle anymore to how many people are dying from air pollution. So I bring this up to bring up this. When you hear people saying we can't afford to address climate change, or even worse, climate change is a hoax, we shouldn't make the planet better because climate change isn't real. Okay, you're wrong, but let's assume for a second you end up being right and climate change was a big hoax. The 8.8 million people who die each year from air pollution, that's not a hoax. The people who develop cancer from the corporate toxins that get dumped into bodies of water in the Ohio River Valley, like what happened with C8, that's not a hoax. Even if climate change weren't real, we would still be better off, we would be healthier, and we would have fewer deaths if we stopped the pollution. So that alone should be enough to make this happen. I don't understand how there are still arguments against it, except I do understand, because just like with corporate media, it's that corporate money flowing to politicians, creating these phony little think tanks that put out their phony little papers, and they pay scientists to put their names on them to say climate change isn't real. It's all funded by the fossil fuel industry. All of it. They actually have a listserv, by the way. We've seen this in discovery for court cases against some of these major companies. They have a listserv of scientists and academics at colleges that they use to pay them a lot of money, and then they just sign off on whatever nonsense report that these chemical and fossil fuel companies want to put out, saying that their product is safe, saying that it doesn't cause cancer, saying that it won't destroy the environment. That exists. It's disgusting, it's shameful, but there are plenty of people in this country who will do anything for a buck, and unfortunately, that does not always exclude those in the scientific community. But all of this, again, we got to have the message of hope. And there is hope. And the hope is coming from the younger generation. Tomorrow, March 15th, 2019, across this country, there's going to be a massive strike of school children here in the United States. What are they striking? They're striking against government inaction on the issue of climate change. The hope for this planet, not just for this country, but for this planet, lies with that generation. They're the ones, more so than any of us, who are, one, going to deal with the most extreme effects of climate change, and two, have dealt with it for their entire lives. Even me, and I'm a millennial. I'm on the upper edge of the millennials, but I'm still a millennial. When I was a kid, yeah, we knew the term greenhouse effect, we knew the term global warming, but it wasn't a big deal. We weren't experiencing the effects of it. The kids in high school, middle school today, this is all they've ever known. For their entire lives, you've had the 97% consensus about climate change. They have seen, they were in their formative years when we had these massive catastrophes. Hurricane Ivan, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Michael, Hurricane Harvey, the California wildfires, the California droughts, fires in Colorado, these bomb cyclones. This is their life, and they want us to do something now. because they're not old enough to run for office so that they can do something. And we owe it to them. Until they hit that age where they can run for office and do some good in this country, it's up to us to protect it for them, because they're taking this issue seriously, because they know they've got to deal with the consequences. We'll be right back.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. I'm Farron Cousins. I've been sitting in for David Pakman today. If you want more from me, you can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/TheRingOfFire. You can also follow me on Twitter at Farron, Farron, Balanced. I want to talk about something recently that Eric Holder said. And no, I'm not talking about him saying he's not going to run for president. Recently, Eric Holder said something that really bothered me. He said that the next Democratic president should consider adding 2 more seats to the U.S. Supreme Court, so that progressives or liberals could then have the majority on there again, right? Pretty simple. Next Democratic president comes along, he or she adds however many seats they need, packs them with some liberals in there, and then boom! All the problems with the judiciary are suddenly fixed, except they're not. Adding more seats to the U.S. Supreme Court is going to do absolutely nothing to fix the massive problem that Republicans have created in the judicial branch of our government. And it's so disappointing and honestly downright disgusting to me to see somebody like Eric Holder, who served as Attorney General, has worked at corporate law firms for his private practice career, to be so naive and clueless about the real problem of our court system here in the United States. Do you want to know what the real problem is? The problem, as Mayor Pete Buttigieg recently pointed out, is that Democrats don't understand the importance of court packing. And I know when you say court packing, it sounds like it's a bad thing, but Republicans have been doing it for decades. And they don't just care about the Supreme Court like Democrats do. And I'm sorry, hate me if you want for saying that, but Democrats only care about the Supreme Court. When was the last time you heard a Democrat, other than Buttigieg, come out and say, we got to do something about these lower courts? That's what I'm running on. We're going to support judges at every level. Or do you hear talking points of, well, there could be 2 Supreme Court openings and we don't want Republicans to get a hold of those? Donald Trump took office with well over 100 lower court vacancies. And the one thing this man has done well in his presidency is appoint those judges. 1 out of every 6 judges right now sitting on a U.S. District Court is a Donald Trump appointee. 1/6 of the district courts here in the United States, Trump appointees. It gets worse. If it could get worse, it gets worse. The most recent addition is a woman by the name of Allison Jones Rushing. Allison Jones Rushing, about a week ago, was confirmed by the Senate. Allison Jones Rushing is 36 years old. Allison Jones Rushing, at 36 years old, just received a lifetime appointment to the federal judiciary. A lifetime appointment to the federal judiciary on the district court at the age of 36, had only been practicing law for 9 years. She's only tried 4 cases to verdict or judgment. 4 cases in her life. And in good health, she could serve 50 years on that district court. She is a Trump appointee. She is Republican-minded. She is a pro-corporate person. Anti-consumers. 50 years. Maybe 40 on a bad year. It's not the only one. We've got other right-wing anti-consumer judges that have been appointed age 39. So you're probably looking at 40 years from that one. Age 46, probably 30 to 35 years. Because that's the difference. That's why this matters. That's why these lower courts matter. And I'll get to more numbers in a minute that are going to shock you. But Republicans are putting younger and younger people on our courts and giving them lifetime appointments, reshaping the lower courts for a generation and a half. I mean, we are talking 40 to 50 years some of these people are going to serve, while Democrats whine and cry about the Supreme Court. And I understand the Supreme Court's important. You'd have to be an idiot not to know it. But it's not the most important. It's not. And you're 100% wrong if you think that, and that's why I disagree with what Eric Holder had to say. Because, here's the numbers. Circuit courts are often the last word in federal court cases. The Supreme Court hears only about 100 to 150 appeals of the more than 7,000 cases that come before the nation's 13 circuit courts each year. So you've got your Supreme Court. We're going to hear about 100 to 150 cases. And then you have the district courts. 1 in 6 are Trump appointees. 7,000 cases decided and done at that level. So you tell me which one's more important. The Republican-packed area that hears 7,000 cases and decides them for good? Or the group that here's about 100 and 150 that, has one more Republican than Democrat? That's a no-brainer. That should be a no-brainer to everyone watching this. The lower courts matter. And put together as a whole, the lower courts do matter more than the Supreme Court. And I know it's easier to overturn a lower court than it is a Supreme Court, but it's not impossible to overturn a Supreme Court case. If it were difficult to do, we wouldn't all be worried about Roe v. Wade getting overturned. The balance of power in that top court shifts. It always has, it always will. Just like with the lower courts. But what Republicans are doing today is making sure that that lower court balance of power doesn't shift for another 50 years. That's longevity. That's thinking ahead. And I hate to say it again, but that is something that the Democrats fundamentally have never understood. And if they did understand it, they never took it seriously. But don't feel bad, right? The Democrats do understand a lot of other issues, and they're taking them seriously, and they're winning on them. Paul Ryan doesn't understand that. Earlier this week, Paul Ryan, who is still for some reason using his @SpeakerRyan Twitter handle, even though he's no longer the Speaker of the House, he's no longer a member of the House of Representatives. But nonetheless, Paul Ryan got on Twitter to praise Donald Trump and praise Republicans and tell us how stupid Democrats are. Here's what Paul Ryan tweeted. He said, "To be clear, GOP wins elections when they're about ideas, not when they're personality contests like Dems and media want. We're clearly better off because of @real Donald Trump. His record of accomplishment is why he'll win re-election, especially when compared to Dems' leftward lurch." Leftward lurch. And he's talking about Dems. I'm assuming he means the very, very crowded field of 2020 Democratic candidates and the new crop of progressives that was recently sworn into Congress back in January. But I wonder if that includes the leftward lurch of the entire country. Perhaps former Speaker Ryan could answer that question for us. Because, as we've all discussed here in progressive media, poll after poll after poll has shown us that these far-left socialistic ideas actually hugely popular with all Americans, regardless of political party. That's why a majority of Republicans support Medicare for all, as do supermajorities of independents and Democrats. Majorities support the $15 minimum wage. Majorities support expanding Social Security. And Trump, on the other hand, and the Republicans just want to cut it by $25 billion with their new budget. Americans want that expanded. Americans like the idea of debt-free college by overwhelming margins. They like the idea of the planet not burning down because of climate change. So if Paul Ryan thinks the Dems have made a leftward lurch and it's going to cost them the election, I might suggest to Paul Ryan perhaps go look at some polls. Maybe get out there and get a feel for the American public, because you've clearly lost touch with them through your time in office. And hey, right now you've got nothing but time on your hands, buddy. Get out there and talk to people. Reconnect with Americans. See what's actually happening. Pick up a newspaper, for God's sake, and read the latest polls. Democrats will lose in 2020 to Donald Trump if they don't recognize the leftward lurch, as you so aptly called it. But it's not the leftward lurch of the Democratic politicians, it's the leftward lurch of the American public. Because here's what the public wants right now. They want substantive and transformational change. They do not want the same old, same old. They understand that they can't pay their medical bills and that something has to be done. The private sector isn't going to do it. The private health insurance companies, the private health care companies, hospital corporations, big pharma, they have been given every opportunity to do the right thing, lower their costs, and stop working over American citizens with their bills. We have been talking about this as a country for over a decade. The rising cost of drugs, the rising cost of hospital care, the rising cost of insurance. They knew we were mad about it. Members of each of those groups has gone and had to answer to Congress for why they're jacking up prices on us for no reason. And none of them stopped doing it. They've had their chance. They've had multiple chances. And they failed to do it. And the American public recognizes that. So the only solution at this point is some kind of Medicare for all program that essentially is going to eliminate private health insurance companies, who again raise our prices for no reason. It's going to force drug companies to lower their prices through Medicare negotiation, which is part of some of the legislation out there. It's desperately needed. It's going to force the hospital corporations to reduce their prices. It would fix a lot of things. And, as we all know, has the benefit of also providing us with an extra $2 trillion over the course of about a decade. It saves us money. It saves lives. It's the best thing for this country. And yet Paul Ryan, the man who was so terrified about running against Randy Bryce that he decided to retire, doesn't seem to understand it and warns us that this leftward lurch is going to be bad for America, even though America really seems to love this leftward lurch of the Democrats. We're about out of time for today, but don't forget, for members, we have the bonus show coming up, and I'm going to run through what's happened this week with the Democratic Party's nominees. Got some new folks in the mix, so you don't want to miss my take on that. Don't forget, you can subscribe to David Pakman's YouTube channel. Check out his Patreon, help support the show, become a member. And if you want more from me, you can find me on Twitter at Farron Balanced, F-A-R-R-O-N, Balanced. Same for me on Instagram and on Facebook. And every day, Ring of Fire, we offer you brand new videos 7 days a week on our YouTube. Become a subscriber, youtube.com/The Ring of Fire. I want to thank David and his entire team very much for letting me sit in today. I am Farron Cousins, in for David Pakman. Thank you for watching.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.